I don't know much about railways, but I seem to be building one anyway. It's all quite simple and cheap, but so far it seems to be working fine. This year I figured out how to make rails, points, bearings, wheels and a small flatbed wagon. Now I need a wagon for holding and carrying wood chips and chunks of timber. They'll be made into charcoal later, but first they need to be moved into the drying tunnel so they can dry out. It's a really interesting challenge actually, because I might need a few of these wagons, and so this is a sort of a prototype. I couldn't find anything suitable to copy, so I'm just experimenting. The basic starting point is a timber frame. I'm using our own spruce timber that I cut a while back on the homemade bandsaw. I squared it up and cut simple lap joints for the corners. There's a long through bolt to hold it together and 4 more bolts at the corners. No glue. This is an extra support bar that gets bolted on to the underside of the frame. I think it will add strength and height, and the height is really important, something I'll get to in a minute. The support bar holds the axle supports. I need another word, don't I? But how long should the axle supports be? That's the question. You see, there's a tricky compromise to make, because this wagon will have drop-down trapdoors in the floor so I can get the wood chips out. And the trapdoors drop down, but they'll hit the wheels very quickly because they're just above the wheels. But if they're high enough, then the wagon will be very tall and top heavy and maybe unstable. So I don't know quite what the best solution is, so I'm looking at it and changing things and looking at it again. Obviously this is upside down, but I'm sure you realise that. The frame I made was 5 feet by 3 feet, because I thought that would best suit the 8-foot long panels of mesh that you can buy readily. These will be the walls of the wagon. I didn't want to waste any, so Will and I bent them at the 3-foot point on the homemade bender. So 2 sheets of mesh will do all 4 sides of the wagon with just 2 joins. Here he comes. Wow.
There?
Perfect. The problem is, because the frame is 3 feet wide, that makes the trapdoors quite wide as well, which means they'll hit the wheels before they've opened wide enough. And the only way they'd open wide enough is if the frame is a long way up above the wheels. I drew a few options to try to figure this out, and in the end I decided that this frame just wouldn't work. 3 feet is too wide. So I took it apart and remade it narrower. Given the size of the mesh sheets I'm working with, the best option in a way would be 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet. But this would give the most volume, approximately 64 cubic feet, and so it would hold the most wood chunks. But that would mean a sillily tall wagon to clear the wheels, and at 4 feet wide it might also slow down the airflow through the wood chips. And of course we need airflow to dry the chips or they will all just turn into compost. That first frame I made was a compromise to make it longer and narrower. It was 5 feet by 3 feet, which gives a volume of 60 cubic feet. So smaller than the optimum, but not by much. But as I say, it was still too wide. So now I've gone down to 2.5 feet by 5.5 feet, which reduces the volume to around 55 cubic feet. But on the plus side, the narrower shape means the air should flow through better. And that new size means the frame doesn't need to be so high above the wheels for the trapdoors to open wide enough. Of course, I don't know how any of this is actually going to work out, but at least it hasn't cost me much to find out. I wonder how much 55 cubic feet of wood chips actually weighs, and if the floor of this is strong enough, and will there be too much weight on the wheels and the axles? I don't have a clue. I'm just going with what feels about right. In fact, this particular wagon will stay at 5 feet long because it wouldn't make sense to waste those long wooden sides. But the next one I build, that'll be full length. As you see, I'm cutting up more old railway sleepers to make more wooden bearings. This wagon will not be going very far, and most of the time we'll just be sitting in the polytunnel doing nothing. So I'm not worried about them wearing out. These will be well oiled later with old engine oil. Some wood preservative and paint went on, and now I'm thinking that this could already be useful for carrying and dumping ballast for the tracks. I know the sides are not very tall, but it would still hold a good weight of stones, probably all that you'd want to carry in there anyway. So maybe I've made a trapdoor ballast wagon. Who'd have thought it? Now, I couldn't quite figure out how to open these trapdoors. I was thinking of strings that hold them up somehow, that I could undo from above maybe. But I'm going with this method instead. A pipe that is supported underneath, and that supports the doors. And it's knocked out of position from one side with a hammer. But how would I release two at the same time? And if they weren't released at the same time, wouldn't the doors bend and maybe get jammed? So to avoid this happening, I just cut the doors in half. So I only need to open one pair at a time and hope that works. It works really well now, but would it still work with all the weight on the doors? Who knows? There you go. You sit there a minute. Ready? Secret surprise. Yeah. As you can tell, I'm stumbling around in the dark a bit with this project, but that's part of the fun of it. The smaller holes in these mesh panels, the more expensive they are, so I'm hoping these 2-inch squares are not too big. There's lots of flexibility still in the mesh, so I might have to add more support later, but for now I'm just putting an extra frame around the top. I cut these little shapes out with a plasma cutter to hold the mesh in place. Maybe they're a bit over the top. And there it is, my first chunky chip drop bottom railway wagon. Quite a lot of work, partly because I got the dimensions wrong, but even so. So if you have a better idea for moving and storing wood chips, then please tell me. I'm really looking forward to trying this, of course, but I need a bit of help to get it to the railway, and Sandra's jumping over things at the moment with Flora the horse. So we'll all just have to wait.